Have a lot of 2-inch squares made of cardstock for mess-ups or early finishers. So I encourage my students to draw whatever shape they want. The only stipulation is that it has to start on one edge and finish at that edge. Some of them will try to draw something in the middle, and I'm like, you can't do that because it has to attach to an edge, otherwise you can't slide it over or turn it. And the only way that's going to happen is if it's starting and finishing on an edge. So once we've drawn our shape, and it can be as simple or as complicated as you like, you need to cut it out. Okay, so there's the shape that we cut out. And then we're going to use what we've learned about transformations to either turn it, which is a rotation, or we could slide it, which is a translation. And then we're going to tape it to the edge. It cannot have any kind of a gap in there, so I want to make sure that the one edge is right up against the other edge. Now I have a shape that I can trace along my white paper. Now, I'm starting on my edge of my paper, and then I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm going to trace along the inside of the shape and the outside. And now I'm going to take my original and I'm going to slide it up so that the inside of the shape matches up. See, if I don't do that, it doesn't match up. It has to match up. Okay, so for this row, I decided to turn the shape so I would get a different kind of a pattern. And I continue to cover up the entire paper, outlined it in black Sharpie, and then I added little stick figure details to give it some humor. Now for this one, I am going to have two different cutouts. So when I first do it with my students, they do a single cutout. And then when they're ready with that, then we do a double cutout, if they choose, or if they have time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I'm going to do my two shapes. And I'm not going to be very creative here. By the way, before we even got to this stage, we played with pattern blocks a lot. And so I let them play with it and make tessellations using them before we even get to paper. Okay, now that I've cut out my pieces, now I'm going to do a little trial and error, decide how I want to place them. I'm trying out a turn on both of these pieces. I could go with that. I could have slid them across, but as long as the edges are touching an edge, this should work. So this time it says starting on the edge, and I probably should have started on the edge, but this time I'm starting it in the middle. It doesn't really matter. But now I'm going to double check, make sure that edges are touching edges. And I keep tracing it out. The important thing with doing your tessellation is to make sure that there are no gaps or overlapping of the shape. So usually like the first row comes out very easily, and then the second row they have to do a little trial and error. Squares are the easiest to work with your students. For more advanced tiling, I would try an equilateral triangle. So I'm going to make my shape inside my equilateral triangle. And you can use any of the pattern block shapes to do tiling with. And now I'm going to cut it out. And so before I deal with this, I want to make sure that I'm taping the edge with an edge. So I'm going to make a mark here to make sure I don't do anything kind of dumb. Okay, so now I've marked my edges, so I know I have to attach the edge of my cutout piece with the edge of my original shape. Otherwise it doesn't work out and you won't be able to find a way for it to fit. So I'm going to test out different things. And what I'm doing right now is I'm seeing, do I see anything? Do I see something that appeals to me? Do I see something that looks like a familiar shape? So I'm testing everything out. I don't like that one either. But when I look at this one, I see a dog shape with its head turning back to look behind it. So this is what I'm going to go with. I like this one. Okay, so I'm starting in the middle of my paper and I'm tracing it out. And then I have to, figure out how it fits best together. That looks like it could be right. But I'm going to test it to make sure that that is the correct way. So I'm testing it out, making sure. And that was the correct way. And I can already tell that it's going to meet up at the end. So I already noticed that I have a hexagon in the middle. So that's going to end up being part of the repeating pattern with it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it 180 degrees. When I tried to do this without making sure that it was a full 180 degrees, my pattern ended up being all wonky. So the use the protractor, make sure it's a full 180 degrees. And now I just continue on with it. I drew the face on the dog ahead of time on the original, and that way, I can figure out where it's supposed to be on my white paper as I'm drawing it in. because otherwise I have a tendency to get confused. So I would say the same thing to my students. I would say, draw what you want it to look like on your hard copy, and then puzzle it in, and then figure out how it's supposed to be drawn on your paper before they make mistakes, and they'll get upset if they make mistakes. And then do it all over the paper. So I'm continuing with my dog theme, and I'm doing dog houses next. So I thought that one fit in with this well. And I'm coming up with my doggy name, Fido. I'll put a little sign around it. And then I'm going to do the boards for the house. Just lightly penciling it in. And then I'm going to shadow in to show some depth inside the house. Okay, and since that looks like a full 180-degree turn, that's what I did. I gave this one Duke. And then I put bones in the smaller hexagons. And then I colored it up, and that's it.